Hello, everyone. My name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. On the show for you today, we have a lot of political battles to talk about, including probably the biggest litmus test for how much the Democratic base cares about Gaza. If Jamaal Bowman is able to keep his seat in the upcoming primary in just under 3 months' time in suburbs of New York City, it's going to be a very, very big test on that. Also, we're going to take a look at how the Israel-Palestine battle is playing out on the campus, and we have Olayemi Olurin with an incredible interview of Olayemi Olurin, I believe. Apologize for butchering that the first time around. But she is a lawyer, political commentator, and she also may have just done one of the best interviews yet of New York City Mayor Eric Adams on The Breakfast Club. A pretty big deal. I know sometimes things get a little bit too New York centered, but it's because it's relevant. Okay, so we're going to get all through that. But first, we will start with the latest on all things Gaza at the moment. And we start in Gaza City. The Palestinian Health Ministry has announced in a statement that on Thursday, 71 Palestinians were killed in Israeli strikes across the Gaza Strip, while 112 others were wounded in the past day. In Gaza City, the Israeli army continues its raid on Al-Shifa Hospital for the 12th day. They are still nearing 2 weeks on this, right here in the middle of Ramadan. Medical sources say that Israeli forces continue to hold 160 Palestinians, including medical staff, in the Human Development Building in the Al-Shifa complex. Some may say they're holding them hostage. Crazy about that. In Deir al-Balah, and also, by the way, we've seen some pretty, clear evidence coming out again and again, and also, recently, but throughout this entire, whole genocidal effort by Israel. It has been very clear to see, you'll see Palestinians essentially tied to tanks as they parade through, various neighborhoods, especially around the Al-Shifa complex, and really evidencing what it looks like to use a human shield, what it, clearly that is what it looks like. And if you hear so much about human shields, I always find it interesting. I'm surprised it doesn't make even some people who are, pro-Palestinian who, buy into the human shields framing. I'm very surprised. It never occurs to them to stop and think a minute and say, hey, I've seen some of these videos of Israelis using Palestinians as human shields, but I've never seen any videos or pictures of it, vice versa on any even, mainstream or not even mainstream media outlets. And, it makes you wonder which side uses human shields more prevalently, and I'm willing to bet it's the same one that throws that allegation out far more, which is the Israeli side, excuse me. And it really does seem at this point they're essentially just targeting homes for fun. In Deir al-Balah, in the center of the Gaza Strip, Israeli warships opened fire on Palestinian homes on the beachfront. In Al-Maghazi refugee camp in the east of Deir al-Balah, an Israeli strike on the Musa family home killed 6 people, including both parents and 4 children, wounding several of the neighbors. And again, this came before this was, there was a time, even during the George W. Bush administration, where Israel would face some level of condemnation for targeting a, Hamas member's home and killing one other civilian, and we're at this point now where they're essentially just letting it loose and just blowing up people, whoever's homes they want for fun. And we've heard some, kind of audio documentation of it, and it's barely getting any kind of notice across the world and by, these mainstream media outlets as these incredible crimes continue apace here. In Rafah in southern Gaza, Israeli strikes on the east and center of the city killed at least 12 Palestinians, including children. And in Khan Yunis, Israeli strikes killed 12 Palestinians, while a nurse was reported killed by Israeli troops at the Nasser hospital. Israeli army released 102 Palestinians who were detained from the Gaza Strip and held in Israeli custody for several days and weeks, according to local media reports. And again, this is all the stuff that we have been reporting, that Mondoweiss has been reporting, that Al Jazeera has been reporting. They've released some really shocking video of just them droning that group of men that was just walking in the middle of nowhere. Well, it just seems like nowhere because it's all been blown up. But they were walking and they were just hit again and again by these drones. You're seeing mass detentions, mass interrogations. No one's asking any sort of questions about that. No one's, who has any journalistic resource beyond Al Jazeera is motivated to say, what are you doing with all these people, and really interrogating the fact that, are these people, it's almost ridiculous to phrase it as a question. Like, these people are clearly not Hamas. They're being picked up. They're being interrogated. These people who have, families. They're big, clear forces in the community as, being civilians, and they are being interrogated for days and weeks, beaten, interrogated, humiliated, God knows what, and finally released. One of those, though, was the Palestinian journalist Bayan Abu Sultan, who was reported missing in the surroundings of Al-Shifa since March 19th, and she posted on social media on Thursday for the first time in 12 days. Oh, and it is just absolutely remarkable. It is beyond imagining, beyond conception, what these people have had to go through. Her last tweet before she disappeared read, "Israeli forces killed my only brother in front of my eyes." And it's just, they probably just did it from, sniper's nest, some, drone control center. It's just like, it's just, these people, it's just like, it's unimaginable evil and unimaginable suffering for the Gazans here. Bayan is one of the few Palestinian journalists still reporting from Gaza City in the north. She and her family were still staying in the vicinity of Al-Shifa Hospital, where her family returned after being displaced in the early weeks of the Israeli assault. When her brother was killed. After activists and journalists began sounding the alarm over Bayan's feared disappearance, Reporters Without Borders demanded in a statement that Israeli forces provide information about Bayan's whereabouts, assuming that she was detained. Palestinians remaining in Gaza City continue to face severe shortage, and then again, just like straight up held hostage, kidnapped. Like, this is Mondawais here, and I feel like that is the much more appropriate verbiage to be using than just detained. It is just, we hear bombings and shootings in the street. Hunger, the shortage of goods, and skyrocketing prices have made people in Gaza City lose taste for life, said Huda Amer, another Gaza City-based journalist, to Mondawais. Bombings and shootings in the street, just absolutely enough. Just unimaginable. Meanwhile, Francesca Albanese made her remarks on Thursday during the presentation of a report entitled Anatomy of Genocide to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. The report, which was released last week, indicated that Israel was violating 3 of the 5 acts described in the Genocide Convention. Albanese said that she had received threats because of the report, and that she has been pressured and attacked since the beginning of her mandate, as you can really imagine, as any UN rapporteur in the occupied territories would be subject to real attack from the Zionist lobby and the various pro-Zionist governments all across the world. Commenting on Albanese's report, the White House spokesperson Matthew Miller accused Albanese of making anti-Semitic comments, and that the entire post of the Human Rights Rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories was unproductive. Again, like, these are people that want, by the way, these are the people that the Biden administration, there's going to be so many efforts, there's going to be so much bullshit, it's going to be thrown at you from now until November, that Joe Biden cares about this, that his administration is serious about bringing these people, standing up to the Israeli state, and they want to end this conflict. They care about a ceasefire. They care about the lives of Palestinians. And then you get this, like the very act of monitoring the human rights situation on the occupied territories is called unproductive by a member of the Joe Biden administration. Like, how many more insults, can they just get before they really get, hopefully electorally punished? They should be legally punished. Let's be, 100% real. Shout out to that guy in the Stanford article. But the report, which was released early this week, essentially said that Israel was violating 3 of these 5 acts. And then this guy comes out and says, these 3 acts of genocide. And Matthew Miller comes out and goes, "Oh, it's unproductive. It's unproductive." And Israel's denied Albanese entry into the country since February. And on Thursday, the International Court of Justice ordered a new set of provisional measures to prevent genocide, including provisions to prevent famine, which essentially is going to be ignored I think we can all realize that. But again, I think the important thing to acknowledge: 100 weapons transfers since the start of the war. We have this guy coming out saying it's unproductive. We have just absolute disrespect, cavalier, nothing from either Joe Biden, let alone Joe Biden. How about the very spokespeople of the White House, of the administration, just absolutely, just shitting on all over everyone about this stuff, and they're going to come, in the same breath, come and try and feed you BS about how they care about the Palestinians, how they're working towards the ceasefire, and they're trying to, at least in some way, hold Israel accountable. Just don't believe it. It's just, I beg people out there. It is just like, it is so clearly, Joe Biden is weak, he is full of it, and he is an absolute liar on this subject, and nobody should be believe him in any way. So anyway, we have continued raids as well on the West Bank. A Palestinian man was wounded in the stomach by Israeli forces on Thursday night during an Israeli military raid in the all-for-war refugee camp. Israeli forces also raided Shufat in Kalandia, north of Jerusalem, and Nablus in the northern West Bank. Meanwhile, Israeli forces continue to impose tight control on checkpoints in the Jordan Valley as they continue to search for the gunman behind yesterday's shooting at Israeli settlers' bus north of Jericho, which wounded 3 Israelis. So again, you look at the disproportionate nature of violence, the continued provocations by the Israeli side, the blatant fact that settlers are just allowed to come in and murder bus drivers, murder random bus drivers, as what happened the other day in the West Bank, and nothing happens to them. But but there's this absolutely stifling state of legal surveillance and all that continues to be put on the Palestinians. All right, we're going to go now to our next story. And it's a pretty important one in Jamaal Bowman's primary. This is in the Gothamist, which is, I think, the public, it's publicly funded, kind of like associated with the NPR a lot, essentially does some pretty good local New York reporting. Let's see what they have to say about the race. Representative Jamaal Bowman supporters hunkered down in the back of a local fish and chip shop on a drizzly night in Yonkers to hear a celebrity politician rally the troops for the Congress member's re-election. "We proved the first point that you can get in the door," Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told hundreds of Bowman supporters gazing up at her at the top of the stairs. "The question is, can you now survive? Can you stay?" Which is a very, very good question. While it was posed to Bowman supporters, it may as well have been directed at his campaign. Outside the warm embrace of a supportive crowd, Bowman is fighting for his political survival and is betting his future on one of the most fractious issues in New York politics, the Israeli-Hamas war and the future of the Palestinian people. Since his upset over 32-year incumbent, Elliot Engel, in the 2020 Democratic primary, Bowman has become a national progressive figure and conservative foil with a penchant for attracting a harsh limelight, which, I think is somewhat, overplayed. If you ask the people in the district, I feel like this is something that they, is something that's not really animating. Maybe they heard a little bit about, the fire alarm poll. They probably heard maybe a little bit about the, 9/11 conspiracy, weird blog theories that he's come out and denounced. I don't think those are going to play any major impact on the race. I think it's going to be all, essentially a progressive fight. It's going to be essentially an Israeli-Palestinian fight as well. But as mainstream, and there's a kind of more interesting, broader post on this. But then we here have, as mainstream Democrats walk a delicate line between supporting Israel and condemning the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, Bowman has doubled down on his calls for an immediate, permanent ceasefire and has called the Israeli air and ground offensive a genocide. And Bowman's challenge is now convincing many of his constituents, many of whom disagree with his crusade against the war, that he can still represent them. His primary challenger, Westchester County Executive George Latimer, is a veteran of local Democratic politics who has much of the backing of the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee and much of the local political establishment. Engel has declared his support for Latimer, so have retired Representative Nita Lowey and a throng of local Democratic town committees, among others. So I think the way of understanding it is kind of a classic on top of this Israel-Palestinian layer. This is at the root. It's a classic progressive versus Democratic Party machine fight. Nita Lowey, you have Elliot Engel, you have all the people coming out to support George Latimer, who has been a Westchester fixture since like 2010 and well before. He's a Westchester County executive. I think he's run for House seats in the past. He's been somebody who has made the connections. He's put in that time and has been, a standard kind of Democratic Party operative and force in Westchester, which is definitely a place that is very economically not really interested in some of the more crazier progressive politics, at least in some parts of it. But if you look at actually, Jamaal Bowman's district, which does include the parts of the Bronx, which, the younger parts of the Bronx are the less white parts of the Bronx that are going to be the most pro-Palestinian and most likely the people most amenable to Bowman's broader, more kind of DSA, Bernie Krat style ideas. But you're going to have these people up, in places like Scarsdale, places like Rye, the kind of more kind of leafier, the wealthier, more affluent, whiter areas where you have, the older, kind of Gen Xer, kind of boomers with the raising of the families, and, the very nice school districts and all that stuff that are not just, more Jewish than the country at large and also just more pro-Israel. You have that kind of third of the electorate, I guess, is rough third, I guess, that you can break down into, of course, how actually big that part of the electorate will be, as well as the part in the Bronx. So the third part that I'm kind of about to mention is going to break down this impromptu breakdown of his district I'm doing. The size of those thirds is going to be determined, of course, on election day and how the campaign goes and all that stuff. But you do have this kind of this third that is definitely kind of going to be George Latimer's base in the same way that Bronx part is going to be Jamaal Bowman's base. And you get, that's all throughout the kind of the northeast part of his district. Then along the Hudson River, you kind of got the younger, millennials who are starting out on that kind of process that, the George Latimer supporters are going on with the kind of, raising a family, getting kids into schools, getting kids into colleges, things like that, in a very kind of traditional, standard suburban life, and social, but are younger, socially liberal, more pro, Bernie Krat, DSA style ideas in terms of kind of internal domestic economic politics. And the theory goes they're going to be the swing voters when it comes to Israel and when it comes to Palestine as well. And it's going to be interesting to see, based on where this is. This does kind of have all the kind of cross sections of the Democratic base. You got more kind of hard left people, and you got more kind of the critical minority vote in the Democratic base. That's represented in this district. You kind of got the young, lefty, white millennials who are just starting out, kind of recent college grads, and then you got the people who are 30 years ahead of them on that track, 20 years ahead of them on that track, and are, maybe their kids are in college, they're, more secure in life, but they also have these kind of more entrenched, for example, they're very uncomfortable with Medicare for all, they're very uncomfortable with the wealth tax, they're very pro-Israel. So that is kind of that kind of fresh out of college, more amenable to things like Medicare for all, free college, things like that, but also, blown away and really just perturbed. And part of, by the way, that majority of voters, most likely that think that what Israel's doing is a genocide, those people, which are going to be mostly along the Hudson River, those are going to be the people that Jamaal Bowman is going to really need to win over. And how he's able to do that is going to be something that Joe Biden, if I were Joe Biden, I would be watching the hell out of, because, let's be real, it's like, you're gonna have to deal with this on a very national scale. The primary is June 25th. You're gonna have to deal with this in a very national scale in a few months after. So it is going to be a pretty big deal. He's not a builder; he's a destroyer," said David Rivkin, speaking of Bowman, said a New Rochelle resident that volunteers with Westchester Unites, a group that's registering Republican and undeclared Jewish voters as Democrats for the June 25th primary. So a bit of a kind of entryism operation, which should be a very, very big deal. The thing about the Zionist lobby here is they're always going to be organized. They're always going to be well funded. And the question is, can the left, we have the people, they have the money. Can they mobilize their, inherent people power as well? So that's going to be a big factor in this race. But, this race will be a great indicator, a great litmus test for the reality of the Democratic base, especially how they feel on Palestine and Gaza, because that's how they are going to really look at that. Even before October 7th, Bowman sought to interject race into the Israeli-Palestinian situation that had a profound impact and really put Jewish communities in his district and elsewhere at risk. Rifkin said, that affected me and my family personally. Bowman has castigated his fellow Democrats, including President Joe Biden, for not being outspoken enough on the atrocities, even those who have modified their stances to call for a temporary ceasefire. The progressive is showing no signs of backing off. I've been told not to use the word blockade, not to use the word ethnic cleansing, not to use the word occupation, not to use the word apartheid. Well, if 18 human rights organizations have referred to Israel as an apartheid state, that's not Jamaal Bowman saying that. Bowman said in an interview, and we are not going to talk about this and are we not going to talk about this, he says, and try and deal with it. Bowman supporters say his tendency toward the controversial is refreshing and even crucial, especially among black voters, which are going to, black and Latino voters can play a big role in the southern part of this district. To be honest and truthful in this day and age, you're going to see a bit radical and a bit out of touch because you're just too damn honest, Robert Winstead, president of Yonkers African American Heritage Committee, said at Bowman's Black History Month event in Yonkers. That's what he said about Malcolm. That's what he said about Martin. A vocal anti-war contingent has also been in strong support of Bowman and criticizes Latimer. Bowman has also had the support of the Union 1199 SEIU and the New York Working Families Party, which has defended him against attacks. So he's got his organizing muscle as well. Engel said Bowman's comments went beyond simple advocacy for a ceasefire, by the way, 69%, according to polling, 69% of his district, New York Democratic voters in his district support a ceasefire. That's, that's something to make sure that this race is going to be interesting. And, those crucial millennial whites alongside the Hudson River in those kind of Sleepy Hollow and towns like that. Those are going to be the people who, probably are swinging on this and maybe were a little bit more pro-Israel at the start. The criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitic. Bowman said, when I criticize the U.S., am I against the U.S. people? Westchester Unites, which officially launched in January, so it's a AstroTurf group there, converted more than 2,000 Republicans and undeclared voters to the Democratic Party to help sway the primary. The County Board of Elections, which does not cover the Bronx portion of the district, said that more than 2,300 former Republicans and unaffiliated voters registered with the Democratic Party between the December 1st, 2023 and February 4th, 2024, the deadline to participate in the primary, which, by the way, is like, if there was a left-wing person trying to bring Republicans into the Democratic Party for some reason like that, I feel like that would make people go absolutely crazy. And the fact that this is doing it to absolutely, no broader, fanfare is very, very telling. I think this is also kind of funny. He does go on to say about genocide, he essentially just goes, genocide to me is when you create gas chambers and you force people into them and kill them, which is a very funny way of, talking about genocide, because it seems to only really think about the Holocaust, because you got Rwandan genocide, you got the genocide in Eastern Europe, you got all these Bosnian genocide. I don't know why I just temporarily blanked on that, and just all the the Khmer Rouge, Cambodian, all of that stuff is not a genocide in the eye. Darfur, all this stuff is just because they didn't use gas. It's such a really just unserious and very, very damaging. It's even if I would not want someone who just thinks that just stupidly or just low level to be in Congress in the first place. Kaufman, who is this guy, Peter Kaufman, Democratic strategist, served as a top campaign aide to Governor Andrew Cuomo and as Hillary Clinton's press secretary when she was a New York senator. Kind of see which political side of the party, side of the party he's going to be in on that. He said that Kaufman said letting Israel take on a life of its own in a campaign launch like Bowman's, where a representative took part in chance to free Palestine, was a bizarre strategy. Most elections at the end of the day are defined by the economy and what's happening in people's lives, Kaufman said. And the idea of kicking off your re-election about a foreign policy issue strikes me as much more deeply ideological than, running for office to represent people in Congress. I think the idea that this kind of very interestingly framed article, which you can tell has a serious kind of anti-Bowman tilt, at least in the way that it is, and it's just all about, the crazy things Bowman said, and just passing off crazy Latimer quotes like that one about genocide is just completely normal, you can tell it's meant to, be a certain way, but either way, this article, you got the Washington Post article. It's going to get a lot of attention. It's going to get a lot of play coming in. It's going to be a real litmus test for how Gaza is going to impact the Democratic Party base in the 2024 election. All right. Do want to go to our last story today, and unfortunately, we are going to have to skip one due to time constraints, and maybe save it for next time. I do want to get into, maybe we'll do another special episode on, really just break it down tomorrow, but it's about pro-Israel advocates weaponizing safety on college campuses, acting on the misbegotten notion that Palestinian freedom is a threat to Jewish safety, and then contrasting that with the whole safety and feeling unsafe on campuses debate that has been going on college campuses for many years now, and we'll get into that tomorrow. But I do want to get today into this very, very interesting interview where Olayemi Olurin, who's a lawyer, political commentator, got a Substack, kind of left-wing associated, very powerful person, powerful speaker, powerful interviewer, journalist, lawyer, all that stuff. And she had a lot of different. She interviewed. She was on the Breakfast Club, which is incredibly, by the way, people do not give it credit. Incredibly influential show, broadcast all over the country. Even though it comes from New York, interviewing someone like Eric Adams on this, which is really it's going to hit throughout New York City. It's going to especially hit Eric Adams' base, but it's also going to hit nationally as well. So here is Eric Adams on one of these issues. This is about the policing units, which is quite interesting. And the stuff I didn't really even know what Eric Adams had been up to on this. So here, this is what she had to say about the policing and all that stuff. And you'll hear about it in just a second while we get the audio set up, but here we go.
Same breath that you want to sensationalize me, want to highlight and point out, an officer was killed the other day, which is a rare occurrence across the United States, but let alone in New York. New York police officers have killed at least 7 people this year, including a 19-year-old. An NYPD officer killed a 19-year-old in Queens yesterday.
I'm not going to dismiss the loss of a life of an innocent person that wears a uniform to protect us.
But you do, of the 31 people dead at Rikers and the 19-year-old killed yesterday.
I feel like I don't want to take you out of context, and I don't want people to all of a sudden criticize that you're being dismissive of a young man being shot and killed.
That's not going to work on me.
I'm not trying to work anything on you. I lost a member of the police department the same way I go to see the mother of an 11-month-old baby that was shot in the head when I first became mayor. I sat in the hospital with her. The same way I go visit these mothers who lose their children to gun violence. I go see them.
Yes, but not the mothers of the people who are dying in Rikers.
Just as I go to see the family member of a slain police officer, I go visit those parents that lose their loved ones to violence.
Are you visiting the family of
the? Do you do that?
First of all, yes, I did. I held a Riker. I represented hundreds.
You went to visit the family member of a slain officer?
No, not the slain officer.
Okay, of course you did.
No, but what about the 19-year-old that was killed yesterday by NYPD in Queens when he called for help? Have you said anything about that? Are you visiting them?
Yeah. First of all, that's.
I love that little, because you get all this bluster, but I visit everybody equally, and then you're just like, wait, what about the person who was killed by the NYPD? Just a few nights ago. I'm just like, yeah, and it was very, 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 very clear to see where Eric Adams was coming down on that. All right, let's get to another clip here again from Olayemi Olurin interviewing Eric Adams on the Breakfast Club.
The federal monitor, who is tasked with ensuring that NYPD is following the law, conducted an analysis. Conducted an analysis that happened 8 years ago, but they're still here monitoring what you're doing. And they said that you have brought back stop and frisk policies that are worse than they saw even during the Bloomberg era. But more importantly, they analyzed the neighborhood safe.
Show me that.
I could show you the report is available, and I know it's been available to you because your spokesperson has commented on it. They did an analysis of over 10 precincts, 10 different precincts. That is factual. There's a federal monitor reporting to Judge T. Swain on it and presenting the information. They said that, yes, listen, let me finish so you can peel it back. They conducted an analysis of 10 different precincts, and of the stops of 10 different precincts, they found that 97% of them, by the way, of the neighborhood safety teams that were disbanded in 2020 because of their disproportionate abuse against Black and Hispanic people that you revived, they analyzed 10 of those different neighborhood safety teams and found that they're conducting 97% of their stops on Black and brown people, and a quarter of them are unconstitutional. That's what the Federal Monitor said, not me.
Yeah, and that's the same.
Yeah, I wish the clip would have cut off there, or didn't cut off there, because I would love to see how he responded to that, because that was like, you get the clear, not just any source, not even just like a human rights group, which I think is a perfectly legitimate, valid source, but you're talking about the federal government, they're coming in, monitoring that, quarter of all these stops under unconstitutional. 97% of all these stops have been on Black and Latino New Yorkers. So, that is a very, very clear and very, very disturbing. And something that I think a lot of people who just see, Eric Adams is the guy who wants to portray himself as this cool, fun-loving guy, not really trying to do too much in either way, just trying to be, moderate mayor who's, speaking about the police, but also comes from, the civil rights, gets off on these civil rights points because of his rhetoric about civil rights, but also because, people see the fact that, he's Black and he's not, looking like, Michael Bloomberg. He's not like this old white guy who's saying all these much more openly offensive things about Black people and criminality. But, Eric Adams coming off with this, I'm just going to go to just like his big thing is just going to all these different, ethnicities and their like various parades and stuff is like a big thing about what he does, and just comes off as this I'm this cool guy, I'm always I'm riding the subway, I'm visiting everyone, I'm doing everything in that, and he has a much more rhetoric towards paying lip service to various civil rights causes and history and all that stuff. Also has the identity of being a Black man who is also a police officer. It just allows him to come through with a lot less friction and put some of these same strictures and some of these same standards on Black Latino New Yorkers in terms of the police without anybody being the wiser, which I think Olurin really, really well calls him out on. All right, one more clip from this interview.
I think you're right that there is a difference between perception and fact and how people feel about safety and the way people feel about the subways. And I think it's your own rhetoric about the subways that has a lot to do with why people feel scared, despite the fact that millions of people ride the subway every day without incident. But you've continued to fearmonger about crime in the subways. You've added 2,000 police officers, despite the fact that you've acknowledged that the subways are not that dangerous. And I think you're right. And poor New Yorkers should not be the ones who bear the brunt of this, but they will if they already have the subway being turned into a place that they have to fear, that there's a National Guard, that there's a hyper-visibility of police, that they're trying to stop people with certain records from even using them, and now you have this congestion price. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, let's go before. First of all, I would love to give me the quotes on my rhetoric, because I'm lost on that. Can you give me the quotes?
Oh, that you fearmonger about the subways?
Yeah,
you've consistently done that since the day one of your administration. One of the first things you did was add 1,000 officers to the subway because you claimed that the subways are unrideable. You and Hochul did this and said how dangerous it is, and you recently did that when you deployed the National Guard.
Which is a big part, by the way, of the Republican surge, not in the cities because they know, the reality of the situation, but all around the cities. The Republican surge in 2022 was really, really spurred on by this rhetoric by Hochul and by Adams.
But that wasn't my question, Queen. My question was, what was my fear?
Which, by the way, it's just like, what a fucking like asshole thing. Just like, that wasn't my question, Queen. Like, just like some little girl asking you a question. Like, no, she's like a lawyer. She's a journalist. It's just like absolutely like taking aback, like the amount of just like, that's not some woke thing. That's not some, I'm being, an SJW or whatever. It's just like, it's just about basic respect for people who have qualifications and are asking you questions that you don't like. Just like treating you like an absolute like child to ask that. Just like, get out of here with that. Like, please.
Mongering. What did I say?
You continuously say, I could point to a number of videos and quotes and everything from you, but you've said repeatedly that the subways are dangerous, that New York is dangerous. You complain about crime relentlessly. So what I'm saying to you is, if you are saying that New York is the safest city, it's one of the safest big cities in this country, which is true, and you're recognizing that the subway stations are in fact not half as dangerous as they're presented to be, I'm saying, how do you reconcile how your rhetoric has played into people's fear?
Okay. And not even just rhetoric, I would say the actions, because she's right. If you tell us,
which is different,
But it's the same thing. If you put 1,000
to each other. Thank you, Charlamagne.
Police officers in the subway, that don't make us feel safe. We think something's wrong if you're doing that.
Let me peel back again, because you got to always peel back this stuff, because oftentimes how you're depicted
he's a joker
in the media that I don't control is how people interpret you. I didn't put the National Guards in the subway. The governor did.
I know, but I know what you said.
But you said, Eric.
You put the freaking NYPD in the subway.
Governor Kathy Hochul, and you co-signed that decision. You did. And I'm not saying this as someone who's following social media. I'm saying that as an attorney in the city and an activist who follows everything that you do.
Yeah, I'm glad you do. Because then you'll realize how I turned the city around if you follow everything I do. You'll realize
I would say no, but we could get to it.
Yeah, it's just like, so... Adams, to his, I guess, credit, is incredibly, evasive on this stuff, but man, oh man, what a mess. Just an absolute, just disrespectful joker who is also, playing into some of the worst Republican fears and rhetoric and, racially tinged rhetoric, I would say as well, about the reality of life in New York City. All right, that's all we got for you today. We'll be back tomorrow with that story that I promised and some more stuff as well.